Hey everyone, this is Christian Heimel, host of Press Row. Thanks so much for listening to the following broadcast, courtesy of Public House Media.
Hi, this is Emily.
This is Lindsay.
And this is Elizabeth,
co-hosts of Beauties and Headcanons here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Once you are done with this episode, we hope you'll come check out our show, Beauties and Headcanons, where we talk nerdy to you about fandoms, fan fiction, and all pop culture for nerds that you can think of. A new show comes out every Friday.
Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Beauties and Headcanons. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Welcome to a brand new episode, the 10th episode of Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. My name is Brice Burge.
And I'm Ivan Sanchez Carrasco. Today we're going to talk about Groundhog's Day. The U.S. men's national team still does not have a coach, and it's been a year since they lost to Trinidad and Tobago, so we're going to air our grievances about that. And on a much positive note, we're going to talk about the Women's World Cup qualifying with France 19 just around the corner next summer.
Your Soccer Passport is sponsored by Squadcast. As podcasters that deal with analysts and guests from around the world, being able to record remotely is key. Current industry standards rely heavily on internet connection, but Squadcast changes that with a simple browser-based tool that requires no additional software to install. The audio is recorded locally as a WAV file, and then it's uploaded to the host computer, allowing some really great audio quality. To get started with your remote podcasting recording experience, go to squadcast.fm for your 14-day free trial. So we've got an interesting situation here this week where we tried really hard to get Jessica McDonald of the NC Courage onto the show. Had some limited success with that based on schedules and technical difficulties. Ended up agreeing that we were going to wait till next episode so that way we could get a really good interview with her, because she deserves it. She's a star, and she's an amazing player, and what she was able to do with NC this year has got to be done right. So we're going to hold off on airing what we have just to make sure that we can do it right for the next time around. That being said, we recorded the other segments first, and Yvonne said Groundhog's Day. I think it's more like Festivus. If you want to use the Seinfeld reference, because the airing of grievances took a long time. So that's going to bring us to the ongoing Jimmy Kimmel joke that is going to be La Liga on this show, because we were going to talk about that in the opening segment today and talk about the struggles that Real Madrid has been having lately in their scoring and that the table is still close together. But as pointed out when we tried recording this before and it failed on us, is that they are only 20% of the way done through their season, and we will have plenty of time to talk about them on further shows. At that point, we realized that we've been recording for over 40 minutes based on this show so far. So we are going to just kind of hodgepodge around and have some fun and say maybe April Fools. And I will say flat out, Happy Thanksgiving. I celebrate Canadian Thanksgiving, and that's way better than Columbus Day. So, so happy Thanksgiving, happy belated Thanksgiving to all of our Canadians out there.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure all my friends are just thinking that we keep pushing La Liga talk back and waiting for Real Madrid to turn it around because they know I'm a Real Madrid fan. So, I mean, I swear that's not why we're doing it. Trust me, we just keep missing out.
Oh. Can we wait until they score before we talk about
there you go.
La Liga?
Okay. So, we're not going to talk about La Liga until Real Madrid scores. The pressure's on you, Bale, Benzema, Contral, score from the goal. Give us something. Yeah. Until then, La Liga on timeout.
Yeah, La Liga is on timeout until Real Madrid scores. We will provide an update on that through social media. Get the graphic package going.
It can be an own goal. It doesn't matter. Just score. Like, it can be an own goal. Put it in the goal. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Just score a goal. Score with your hands. Score with your thighs. Score with your butt. Scoring your own goal. It doesn't matter. But yeah,
bring in somebody from the Madrid basketball teams and then just like slam dunk it. And whatever you got to do.
Yes.
Score a goal. It's been 4 weeks. You lost to Moscow of all places. Grow up.
Yeah, score a goal, then we'll talk about you guys. But until then, we're going to talk about the men's national team, which is already frustrating, and then we're going to talk about women's soccer with the World Cup qualifying because Real Madrid, you have not scored, and we've already talked about you too long today for not scoring.
Now, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will have that segment on the men's national coach or the lack thereof. And it is something that we think deals with some of the real important aspects. So, we've had a little bit of fun in this longer intro, but there's some serious stuff that we got to talk about. And there's some concerns about the longstanding administrative process involved with the men's national team and the lack of a coach so far. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we will have that discussion for you. You're listening to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media.
Allison is perfect. I mean, she'd never tell you that. She's perfect. Allison, wait, are you texting and driving? Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org, brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Your Soccer Passport. We are on social media and would like to hear from you. Don't be afraid to interact with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. At Your Soccer Passport is the best way to find us. Men's national team still don't have a coach. It's been a year since that loss to Trinidad and Tobago, a loss to Trinidad and Tobago, though the U.S. was playing so bad that night they probably could have lost to Trinidad or Tobago. So it's still cuts deep because we're both youngins. I believe I'm older than you by a little bit, but it's the first time in my lifetime that the U.S. ever missed a World Cup. And I'm not happy with this. I'm not happy with the way that U.S. soccer has been handling this procedure, or the lack of interviews, or the lack of seeming interest in anything. It's annoying. It really is annoying right now. And Ivana, I guess, to give it to you a little bit, where do you fit? Where does your heart lie when dealing with the situation so far and the lack of a head coach?
I mean, it's more baffling than anything. The national team will play Colombia on Thursday, the 11th, which will, I believe, mark the exact 1 year that the team lost to Trinidad and Tobago. The fact that they've been stagnant for the whole year is mind-boggling. You know what I mean? You expected them to kind of sure, you take your time, fine. They don't make it. They don't make it. You kind of go through the shock process, and then you wait. Okay, we'll wait till after the World Cup, or we're looking at international coaches who've coached during the World Cup, get them, and that gets pushed back. Before that, there's a pushback because there was the election for a new head of U.S. soccer. And then they kept pushing it back because they were waiting for Ernie Johnson to start on August 1st. And now it's been 2 months since Ernie Johnson has taken over as the GM for the men's national team, and there still isn't anybody. There have been names going around. There have been some quality coaches who we both liked. Juan Carlos Osorio, who instead has taken the job at Paraguay. And I don't know, just kind of mind-boggling how if you want to have a positive spin about them not making it the World Cup, you go, okay, well, now we have 5 years to prepare for 2022, and we can start fitting in these young players, which they've kind of done over this last year. But when you don't have a coach to implement any ideas or any structure or anything of what they have in mind for the national team, you essentially let that whole year go to waste. And now you're right back where everybody else is at. All these teams who did make the World Cup and all these teams who are in a better position than you, now you're at equal footing all over again. And you still don't have a head coach. It's just crazy. It's just mind-boggling how there just isn't any idea of what they have in mind, or there's no rumors or anything of what they want.
I mean, you're tossing the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, because you're losing Pulisic the same way that you're losing Bradley Altidore and Dempsey. You know, at this point, it's just you are losing potential skill sets that if you really wanted to see them capitalize in the American markets and capitalize for the national team, then you would create a way that would make them relevant, and you're not. I mean, you're seeing a couple of the older guys from the back, you know, Brooks, Yedlin, they're starting to pop up a little bit more when they weren't there in the World Cup qualifying in the last parts of the Hex. And you're bringing in a couple of guys like Tim Weah, but there's no end goal. There's no personality. There's no belief that you've got a system in place. And now you're just kind of goofing around on U.S. soccer's dime. And that's not acceptable. You went out there, you lost, and more importantly, you used Bruce Arena to be your like fill-in coach, the guy that really nobody likes. Like everybody says that they love him and they respect him, and that's just not true. They don't like this guy, and I'm one of the guys that are willing to say Bruce Arena is overrated and constantly screws up. So it's been frustrating to me, because the thing is that now, because I believe because of this weight, we can start eliminating options. You know, obviously we had both tabbed Osorio as somebody that we would want. He obviously cannot do it. You had talked about Caleb Porter as possibly being a candidate. And if he's not getting an interview by this point, he won't. He's been sitting there on the shelf, ready to be picked up at any time, and they haven't. So they could have done the same thing with Tab Ramos as well. The U20 head coach, he was available this entire time, and again, did not talk to him at all. So in my mind, the only people that they could potentially be going for at this point is somebody with direct MLS background, currently coaching in the MLS right now, and are waiting until their MLS season is done and over with. And that is not a good thing. I think it's a bad thing for U.S. soccer to say that we're waiting until the MLS season is done and over with before moving this far. And for me, based on who I think it is, the fact that they're goofing around with this fan base once again is absolutely appalling. And some of the stuff that you don't want to be doing in terms of the brash American soccer style compared to the non-soccer style that we see in other things. I want to see things that are more along lines with the women's side in the toughness and the brashness, and to goof around like this is not something that I can support as somebody that would like to support my own country's soccer federation.
Yeah, and I'm with you on Bruce Arena. He was kind of a pompous, arrogant, never really took full responsibility of the national team. And you saw the arrogance in that Trinidad game with the way he took it upon it, that game, the way the players took it. There was an arrogance to it. And yeah, I think I'm on the same boat with you. I think they're going to now wait for the MLS season to be over, which, depending how far it is and which coach it is, I would probably want of the MLS coaches Oscar Perea to be the coach. I just really like what he does with youth and what he's done with DC United. But whoever it is, depending how long that team is in the playoffs, it could be another month and a half. And if they make it all the way to the MLS Cup, now you're talking about all the way into December. And after the November friendlies, there's not another friendlies. They're not another set of international friendlies till March. So now, really, unless they get somebody within this next window of before international friendlies, it's going to be a year and a half till they actually have a head coach, which is pretty embarrassing. It lacks innovation, lacks ideas, lacks any purpose. Like you said, if they wanted Caleb Porter, he'd been there. He would have gotten the job already, I think. He's been in sabbatical for almost a year now himself. And there are other coaches that you mentioned too, that if they wanted to get him, they would have gotten him by now. So it's either they don't have an idea, they have an idea and they're not, and it doesn't look like it's executing it properly, or and none of the coaches we know, they're not bringing in, they're not getting Pep Guardiola, so it's not like waiting all this time it's going to be this amazing hire that's going to change the way we think about U.S. soccer. It's going to be someone we've kind of expect, and it's not going to move the needle that much for waiting over a year for the head coach to be named.
Well, there are two candidates that could move the needle. One would be good. I think one is like the possible scenario where it's so off the wall but still big enough, and that's David Wagner, who's at Huddersfield Town right now. You know, if Huddersfield Town continues to screw up, they're not doing very well in the EPL right now. If he loses his job, then that is a possibility to bring him in and still be splashy enough as a coach, but you have to have him essentially be fired before he'll take it. And that's not a message you want to be sending to American soccer fans. The other one is straight up malicious, and that's the one that's been kind of taking me off and leading me to be so emotional, and that's Greg Berhalter. And if they do that to Columbus right now, with all the talks about relocating that franchise to Austin, about killing off one of the original MLS franchises, one that has been stable, one that has been responsible, one that has been loving and caring and everything that the original MLS was, and then steal this coach and steal the team, is not something that is going to be viewed as good for the American people. They're going to see this and Berhalter has a lot of youth. He's got the ability to give some guys that extra little touch, especially in the scoring side of the pitch, that allows them to really, really do some fun things in Columbus. But with all of the other things that are going on in the MLS, specifically referring to Columbus relocating, things that do not deal with on-the-pitch issues, and then you take their coach, that's not something that's going to fly. That's going to tick off a whole bunch of people that have tried very hard to keep that team, and you just spat in their face by stealing their coach to make sure that, you don't have a coach, probably shouldn't have a franchise, off to Austin.
Yeah, is there going to be if Austin gets a team, is there going to be a more disliked team before they're even a team, before they're even a franchise in the MLS history beforehand? I mean, the feeling you get from fans from around the league is they want Columbus to stay in Columbus. They like Columbus. It's one of the original teams. And if they move and the coach leaves, there might not be a more disliked team right out of the bat than Austin. But that's kind of straying away from the point. Yeah, you're right. Huddersfield is struggling, so that could be an interesting hire. But I mean, that's still a risk to just be waiting for him to get fired and hoping that he gets fired to then try to hire him. Because, I mean, if that's your goal, I mean, that's such a risk to take, and it's a risk where you made no progress. And they haven't made progress in a year. They've been stagnant, and last time we left them, they were out of the World Cup after losing to Trinidad and Tobago. So to be stagnant from that spot is not a good place to be standing.
If they are going to go after Berhalter, or if they're going to go after Paella or Vermes at Sporting Kansas City or something like that, somebody that's actively coaching, does that count as stagnant? Does that, with all of the people that are in MLS, even if the guy that you want is in MLS and your safety pick is in MLS, is that considered stagnant? Is that considered poor leadership if those are the guys that you're going for, if your safety pick and the guy that you want is still in the same league, because it's different if you're going after somebody else. Like, I mean, if you were to go after Carlos Queiroz, who was with Iran and was a former Metro Stars coach, then yeah, that would seem stupid if you were trying to go after him because you weren't doing anything else supplemental, trying to find somebody else to get that job. But you've got lots of changeover in the U.S. Soccer Federation. You've got lots of big news popping up with the development of MLS. If you want an MLS guy and you know that you can fall back on the MLS, is that stagnant or is that smart?
I think it's stagnant by the fact that it's taken so long. For the same reason that I mentioned that, okay, you can the positive of there's no positives of not making the World Cup, but you could go, okay, now we can focus on this next generation, play our youth, put a coach who can set up a 5-year plan to try to make it to the next World Cup. But that's been lost, and now the hire is going to come a year and 2 months after it. Then I don't know. It just seems that you could have hired him. You could have hired one of these MLS guys last year. Then, if that was your plan, if you were waiting for Carlos Queiroz, you would have gone after him after the World Cup ended. So it just kind of seems like they don't have a real idea or a real plan of what they want to do, and I think that's the biggest worry if you're a U.S. fan is they kind of seem directionless. I guess that's the biggest thing, that there's not a lot of there's not an idea. Even if it's a bad idea, there's not an idea of what's going on.
How does this coaching process, or the lack thereof of a coaching process, impact the legacy of the front office in U.S. soccer right now? With all that changeover, there's got to be some thought process that this lessens their leadership ability.
I mean, I've never thought very highly of the U.S. front office to begin with. I think there's a huge fundamental problem with U.S. soccer that starts from the people at the top, because they don't want to. They're very happy where they are and very happy what U.S. soccer gives them, that they're not willing to take a risk and change the things that need to be changed from the bottom up. So, with that regard, I personally can't really think any less of the heads up of U.S. soccer. You saw in the election last year, they went with the next guy in line. They didn't try to do something new. So, I mean, if anything, the fact that I'm not as surprised as I should be about the lack of hire is probably the most disappointing thing of it.
Well, as you said, there's an upcoming friendly against Colombia, and there will be another one after that with Peru. Depending on if there's not anything in a relative amount of time, you could be looking at March, or more importantly, you could be looking at undermining another successful defending of the Women's World Cup heading into the World Cup next summer, and then all of a sudden picking that time to release your men's national team coach, which would be horrifically detrimental to the women's game, in my mind, at least in the United States, because there's a lot of sexism that still happens. There's a lot of people that choose not to watch women's sports. And so if you're wanting to send the wrong message, it's goofing around and not taking this hiring process seriously, and then announcing a men's coach right before the returning champion United States women's team comes out to try to retain that World Cup title a little bit longer and win one again. It's the wrong message, and that's something that I think is going to be very dangerous. The U.S. has to get this done before March.
Yeah, I mean, and they got the Gold Cup. They have a tournament this summer too that they need to focus on, that they need to have some sort of idea of what they want to do, because this World Cup is going to be a good way to measure themselves against Costa Rica, against Mexico, and see where they are at now, 3 years when the summer rolls around from the next World Cup. So yeah, they need to get this right, and they need to get it done relatively soon.
Well, we did allude to it a little bit. World Cup qualifiers for the women this summer. In France, qualifiers are going on right now. We'll take a quick break, do worldwide headlines, and then we will wrap up the show with some of that World Cup qualifying information for you. You're listening to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. Time now for worldwide headlines here on Your Soccer Passport, a segment touching on some of the other big news from around the soccer world. The longer lists for the Ballon d'Or have been released, with a wide array of players listed for their efforts last season. Unlike FIFA's The Best Honors, 30 players are eligible to win the title, which include Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo, who have won the last 10 titles combined. The winners will be announced on December 3rd. An Atlanta United player is headed to the English Premier League, but not the first player you would expect. Arsenal is interested in Paraguayan striker Miguel Almiron, who has added a lot of depth near the top of the field for the MLS side. The transfer fee is £15 million, or approximately 19.6 million US. And that transfer fee isn't going to mean much for Arsenal, as a new kit deal has the team with a big influx of money. The team has announced that they will be leaving Puma for Adidas in a £300 million deal over 5 years. The deal goes into effect July 1st. Today's worldwide headlines are brought to you by the Public House Media Store Envy online shop. The best way to promote Your Soccer Passport and any other PHM shows is with t-shirts, mugs, and more available in the Store Envy shop. Visit publichousemedia.storeenvy.com. That's STORENVY.com. And welcome back to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. You can find us on Twitter for all of your updated news. I am at that Brice Burge, Brice with an I. And Ivan, what is your Twitter handle?
Ivan Sanchez C, Ivan Sanchz Z. So yeah, follow me on there. And follow us on Instagram as well. We do some stuff on there too. So follow us there and on Facebook. And yeah, say what's up.
Awesome. Okay, so as promised, the Women's World Cup is going through qualifiers right now. Some are set, some still needing to be set. 3 slots from Africa, 1 from Oceania, and then there are 3 from CONCACAF with a runoff option between the 4th team in that and Argentina. There's also the second place, tournament that needs to be wrapped up for the final European spot. Netherlands is up against Denmark 2-0, and Belgium and Switzerland are tied 2-2 after the first leg in that. Then on October 9th is when the games will have their second leg in that tournament. So we'll find out who will be involved in that, and that will be set up on the day that this is released. So with this, there's lots of things involved with World Cup qualifiers. To just kind of run through who's in there so far. The Asian World Cup is set. They're all ready to go. China, Thailand, Australia, Japan, and South Korea, the same 5 teams from last year, will be in this year as well. Brazil and Chile are in as the Copa America champions and runners-up. This will be the first time that Chile has ever made the Women's World Cup. In the UEFA qualifiers, your group winners are Spain, England, Scotland, Norway, Sweden, and Germany. All those teams made it last time in 2015. The difference, though, is that Italy won their group. This is the first time since 1999 that these guys have come around, and Scotland is making their first ever World Cup. We do know that some teams are screwed up a little bit in terms of what to expect, namely in Africa. Africa is kind of the big one that is just a mess right now. One of the countries has a ban, but made it to the final 8. Specifically, as I try to find the one that it is, it's Equatorial Guinea is in the top 8 in the CAF right now. and they're able to compete in this tournament, but they're not actually allowed to move along to the World Cup, regardless of if they deserve it. So Algeria, Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea, Ghana, Mali, Nigeria, South Africa, and Zambia. Those are the 8 teams. But again, Equatorial Guinea cannot qualify for the World Cup, and that is due to their disqualification and their ban from FIFA directly regarding their team. So already drama still all over the place. Ivan, is there anything that really stuck out to you in the qualifications so far?
I think Chile is a nice little story, especially being a Latin American. It's good to see different Latin American countries make the World Cup because I think it's important for the women's game in those countries. So much when we think about soccer in Latin America, it's all men, and we think about, and part of it has to do culturally, the way we in the households, for a long time in Latin American cultures, we've seen men compared to women and what one are allowed to do and one aren't allowed to do. So I think that's really important, the fact that these new countries are getting these opportunities to qualify, or they're earning the right to qualify. And it's good for these women, for these girls in these countries to have examples for them and to see that soccer is an option for them to play in something that probably might not have been true 15 years ago, 20 years ago. So I think that's a good story. Locally here, you see the women's national team kind of running through the qualifying so far. They beat Mexico 6-0. They beat they won today 5-0 against Panama, and you just kind of see where the women's national team is at. And another example, you see the haves and have-nots of women's soccer. You have the women's national team here who have every advantage when it comes to the infrastructure, even though it might not be what it is for the men when it's compared to these other women in the local CONCACAF qualifying. It's just above and beyond. It's amateurs against professionals, really, and you kind of see it early on the stages of it. And I think that's something important, and that's something important to notice so that the women's game can grow in these countries like Panama, like Cuba, and like Trinidad and Tobago.
Trinidad and Tobago, as you mentioned, have been eliminated already. The way the CONCACAF does it is that they have a group that will play each other. United States, Panama, Mexico, and Trinidad and Tobago will be in Group A. Group B is Costa Rica, Canada, Jamaica, and Cuba. Cuba's been blown out by Costa Rica 8-0 already. Canada beat Jamaica 2-0. So that aspect already has Costa Rica and Canada in the driver's seat, and they will be playing some matches up here pretty soon. The other issue is that Panama and Mexico are playing each other, I believe, tonight.
Or the 10th. They play the 10th. So
the 10th, yeah. So like that's a huge one right now because Mexico's women's team has struggled to be consistent in a lot of ways. But if they happen to be consistent right now, they need to win. They need to get these goals against Panama because they still have to go in and play more games right now. And I'm not sure if they're going to be consistent enough. Even with a draw against Panama, I'm not sure they're going to have the goal differential to really get over it.
No, they won't. If they draw, they're out. So they need a win for them. And I think it would be a huge disappointment for the Mexican national team if they don't make it out of the group, let alone not make the World Cup. Last couple of years, the Liga MX has amplified a women's league, and where most club teams down in the first division also have a female counterpart team as well. And I think you've seen the growth of that with the younger team in the U20 Women's World Cup making it and making a presence there. But now you need to see at the national team level, and for them to make back-to-back World Cups would be huge for them. And to bow out early on here with the strides they've tried to make in the women's game would be a huge disappointment for the Mexican national team.
I agree with that 100%. And, I think the thing is that with Panama, for them to make it out of the knockout, out of the group stage into the knockout stage would be an even bigger deal. I mean, they're going to have to play either Costa Rica or Canada, and there's no way that Panama is going to beat either of those teams. But at the exact same time, I truly believe that United States, Costa Rica, and Canada are way above the group. The difference is can Panama move out of the group stage and then beat Argentina in the playoff? Because Argentina is awaiting whoever finishes in fourth. So if you make it out of the group stage, even if you get blown out of the water in your semifinal and the third place game, you still have a chance to make it into the World Cup with that one more game against Argentina. And that may be a route that Panama could take in, kind of backdooring into the tournament. But that's something that Mexico wants instead. And it means a lot more for Mexico, I think, than it does for Panama, as you described. So it is going to be a difficult situation for these teams. The other thing, too, is that some of the Pan Am games, and the teams are determined by this. So Colombia, Uruguay, Paraguay, they kind of qualify for the Pan America games based on this tournament. So a team like Cuba could still get a lot of experience depending on how they do in their final two games in group stage. So it's going to be interesting the rest of the way out with the implications that these tournaments have for the development of the women's game.
Yeah, and I think the pressure's on Mexico to make it out of the group. I don't think they have Panama doesn't have the pressure, I think, that Mexico has to in this game, in the last group stage game. And then, the Canada-Costa Rica game will be important to see who avoids USA in the semifinals, because I think that's kind of the big thing. You want to avoid the USA as long as possible, get into the semifinal, and if you're Canada or you're Costa Rica, you're going to have a better chance of that automatic qualifying game against Mexico or Panama, whoever you get. So it'll be interesting to keep your eye on that. U.S. national team still rolling. They probably should win this tournament pretty handily, I think. And if they don't, it'd be a huge disappointment for them, especially coming off an Olympics where they didn't win the gold either. So pressure on them in that regard to not fall victim to an early upset.
I think a bigger one for me is in terms of who actually needs this the most. It's got to be Canada. Canada did very poorly at the last World Cup, and they've shown that they can do a lot, especially in the Olympics as a team. Some of their star players, Sinclair, they're getting older. This may be their last World Cup. Most likely will be their last World Cup for a couple of them. But with not getting in a good scenario and maybe kind of falling into the traps that the United States is, where the United States' primary issue right now is getting Becky Sauerbrunn a goal, not actually worrying about what the results are. So, Canada doesn't have that ability. Jamaica has shown that they have enough to kind of jump up and make a mess for a team, but Canada did take care of Jamaica already. So Canada just has to make sure that they are putting goals in the back of the net when Cuba comes around, because it could be, like if there is a draw with Costa Rica, it's goal differential. And Costa Rica dropped 8 on Cuba. So it's a big one there on the other side of it, because I know Canada needs this. Canada needs not just to do very well and finish maybe second to the United States, but they have to be approaching this tournament like they're going to win it. And that could be by taking the U.S. off guard. But, do you want to catch them off guard in this tournament, or do you want to catch them off guard in the actual tournament in the World Cup in France? Because there's a lot of good teams on the European side that have already qualified. And the questions about the African teams, Nigeria typically makes it, but South Africa has looked pretty good this year. They've really grown as a team. Ghana is the host nation. And for a team like Mali and Algeria, who are in parts of the Saharan northern parts of Africa where their neighboring countries are not sending women's teams, they're not sending teams from Egypt or Sudan or from Tunisia. So there's an extra slight against these players that they want to go out and do really well. So it's just an interesting aspect in the women's game, the different motivations that you're getting. But with Canada, I believe truly that you're starting to see some of those traditional values that we think of a lot when you have a team that's got to win now more than anything else. And I think that's that Canadian team right now, is that they got to win now. If they want to win a World Cup, it's got to be France.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, and it's just crazy to think how far they haven't fallen completely far, but the gap that USA has gone over Canada, when you look back at that London semifinal they had in the Olympics in 2011, that was a banger of a game, and that was two teams equally matched. And you kind of see them have gone slightly opposite directions since then. So this is really Canada's, especially this generation's, last chance at this, when you have young countries like Mexico in the region getting better and trying to go through the growing pains. I think in the next couple of years you might see a shift between those countries. But yeah, it's really big times for Canada to step it up and try to hold on and make a good run here.
Lots of games coming up across the world to wrap up these last potential spots. As we said earlier, there are a number of teams that have already gotten in. Out of the 24 slots, 14 plus the host nation has qualified already. 27 countries are still eligible to fight for those 13 remaining slots. So there's still a lot of good soccer left to be played on the women's side of the ball. You've been listening to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. I've been Brice Burge, Yvonne Sanchez Carrasco as well. Want to thank you for listening to this episode and hope you will continue to follow us on iTunes, Spotify, and wherever your favorite podcast can be found.
Thank you, guys. Good listening to you. And real quickly, I want to give a mention to my old high school coach, John Callahan. Last Friday was 3 years he passed away from cancer. He was a good man. He brought a lot of joy to everybody in Corvallis and the soccer community. So, we still think about you, JC. We love you. And, just want to give him a quick shout out and to everybody down in Corvallis High School, Corvallis soccer community. Love you. And we think about you all the time, JC.
Cheers to that. Thanks for listening. This is Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media.